World War II was a fascinating time. It was the only time in aviation history where development evolved so quickly that as soon as an aircraft took off from Manston, it was immediately showered in a hot lead bukkake, and the words "fuck you, Tommy" crackled over the radio, indicating of course it was time to return to the "fuck you" Hans drawing board. With the pleasantries out of the way, welcome to my first look and flight of the P-47D Thunderbolt. As is customary, we'll take a look at the exterior, and as usual it looks magnificent. So rather than loading it with superlatives, I have some information for you about the upcoming release. There will be 3 variants of the P-47D release. The first one on early access will be a late 30 variant. It'll have a late style throttle quadrant, K-14 gun sight, dorsal fin, and the bomb and chemical release panel. And before you sickos start getting a boner, no, there won't be any chemical weapons. Later in the development cycle, we'll have the 40 variant. It'll be identical in many ways to the late 30 variant. It'll have the late type throttle quadrant, the K-14 gun sight, dorsal fin, but it'll also have rockets because fuck yeah, and it'll have a new weapon selector switch with rocket selector panels. Also during the development cycle, we'll have the early 30 variant. This has the old style square throttle, the Mark 8 gun sight, and the old type bomb release mechanism. It doesn't have a dorsal fin. Now the time has come, so like the 80s rock star said to the groupie, let's have a poke around inside and see what it smells like. The cockpit is an absolute wonder to behold. It's quite new, but it's been serviced a few times. Seeing there 3 axes of trim made my little black heart aflutter. Not having to continuously tug on the stick like a desperate man trying to stay firm for an unattractive partner will be quite refreshing. Check out the throttle quadrant. There are 4 levers to master, and if you want to get the most out of this beast, master them you must. Check out the reflection on that chrome. I bet most of you hadn't seen anything like that since you went rooting on your mum's bedside table when you were 5. The instruments look crisp, clear, and have a depth that's really going to shine in VR. Worth mentioning are the scratches on the cylinder in the left. They're so perfect they almost go unnoticed. The real show stealer in this pit is the K-14 gun sight. Just look at it. If the person responsible for this isn't getting his helmet polished on a regular basis, you guys as colleagues need to just get on with it. Form an orderly queue around his desk every Friday afternoon because this stuff is just too good to go unrewarded. What I really love about this pit in particular, and DCS pits in general, is even the stuff that nobody can generally see is modelled. A classic example of this is the topmost silver screw just to the right of the gun sight module on the panel. Only somebody who's sat on a machine that's been serviced by an impatient bell end would notice this. The guy has managed to drill out the cross with a screwdriver and twist it at home with a pliers, leaving an absolute fucking headache for the next poor guy that has to service it. If you're the type of engineer who's done that in the past, don't do it again. Moving on and letting go, the artificial horizon, engine and temperature gauges look just magnificent. If you're looking for another reason why the Eagle Dynamics art team are on the big bucks while you people are eating crayons, look no further than the oxidization on the cylinder on the right. Behind the stick you'll find the weapon release panel. The 3 pulleys along the top are there for redundancy. If the electromechanical stores release fails, you can jettison using the pulleys. The 3 center switches are wing and belly stores. The wear just in front of the rudder pedals is tastefully done and not at all gratuitous. I really have to stop watching adult entertainment and find some new adjectives. On the panel beside your left knee you've the circuit breaker panel, the various test, generator and illumination controls. Beside the right knee you'll find the oxygen and radio set controls. There's just one more thing I can't leave the cockpit without showing you. The starter switch has 2 positions, one is energize, the other is engage. It's nice to know somebody in Eagle Dynamics is a fellow Star Wars fan, as in this pre-release version they've named one Picard and the other one they've named Kirk. Really nice touch guys, I appreciate it. If you don't learn anything else about the P-47 throttle quadrant, you should learn this. Your boost lever should never move past your throttle lever. So during general operation, if you need to reduce your throttle, you first move the boost back and then reduce the throttle. This is not always practical, particularly if Gunter is trying to force a hot stream of lead up your sphincter. However, the people at Republic thought of everything. There is a little latch that can link the throttle and boost. This means the boost will never travel beyond the throttle. There is a downside, because there always is. I have read in some contemporary pilot manuals that linking the 2 can lead to a loss of up to between 300 and 400 horsepower in certain conditions and at certain altitudes, but the choice between convenience and utility is yours. Before we jump to startup, I want to show you another cockpit feature I found really cool. The UV lighting is outstanding. Its primary purpose obviously is for operation in low light conditions. However, there is a very important secondary purpose. If one evening on starting your aircraft and dialing in your UV rheostat you discover iridescent little pools and specks all over the cockpit, you can infer that your maintenance sergeant has been using your pit as his personal masturbatorium. Of course, in those pre-DNA days you'll have to do a quick taste test to confirm before recommending the dirty bastard for court-martial. The startup process is nice and involved, but not too taxing. I'm not going to show you the whole process here because I make tutorials. That'd be like Chris Brown kicking the shit out of his girlfriend on the first date. However, some parts of the startup may bring back painful memories of trying to get your rent money together during your student days. I won't be a total miser with the information though, so when you get to the part where you've held down energize for 20 seconds, flip straight up to engage and hold the engage in place while you flip the mixture forward. Hold it there for a while until the RPM rises and the engine is running stably. Once everything is ticking over nicely, ensure the parking brake is on, set the throttle to between 8 and 10,000 RPM and wait for the engine to warm up. Another nice little feature with this aircraft is the flap angles are clearly marked on the wing. This is particularly useful for short field takeoffs. The P-47D is probably the easiest of the DCS World War II aircraft to taxi in. While the P-51 is certainly easy to taxi, this is heavier and therefore a little less flighty. To turn, you simply tap the brake in the direction you wish to turn. For the greatest visibility, zigzag along the taxiway. For more angular turns, simply throttle up a tiny bit before the turn, throttle back, and then tap the brake in the direction you wish to turn. This is my first takeoff on the P-47D. It's a little bit sketchy, but overall I was pleasantly surprised. The trick here is stick back, brakes on, and throttle up a little bit. Then release the brakes and smoothly throttle up to about 52 inches manifold pressure. Ensure the tail wheel lock is on before you begin your takeoff. At no stage during the takeoff roll should you use your brakes. The rudder should be preset to takeoff trim and you should preemptively move it a tiny bit to the right early in the takeoff roll, so when it becomes effective at about 60 or 70 miles an hour you can use it to adjust your course. Return the stick to centre at about 60 miles an hour. The aircraft should lift off the runway at about 110 miles an hour. You can see I left it just a little bit too long before easing the stick a tiny bit back. I have to say that this is one of the few World War II aircraft that doesn't make you prolapse so hard on takeoff that everyone else on the server thinks you're towing a pink banner in honour of Pride Week. Another really forward-looking feature of this aircraft is the electric canopy. No more winding that handle for hours like your grandmother powering up her clockwork vibrator. Oh, and take a look at the gear retraction sequence, it's just mesmerising. Low and medium altitudes are not the best habitat for the P-47D, but if handled responsibly it's certainly no slouch. The flight model is under development, so everything is subject to change in that area. I'm no audiophile, so I'm just going to shut the fuck up and let you hear the cockpit sounds for a moment. I think you'll be impressed too. The primary armament for the P-47D is 8 12.7mm machine guns. They even conveniently count them in each wing for you. Now the difficult part for you flight simmers is you're going to have to multiply the number on the wing by 2 to get the total. I know you came here for the cock jokes, not applied math. The only thing I can promise you is the rest of the video will be totally free of heavy math. Another interesting fact about the P-47D is during its development they began to notice the effects of compressibility. This is the effect where as an aircraft approached transonic speeds in a steep fast dive at high altitude, the aircraft would buffet and become uncontrollable. And the only way to resolve the situation was to ride it out into thicker air until control could be regained and hopefully the pilot could pull out of the dive. As the P-47D was capable of very fast diving speeds, it had a pair of underwing flaps designed to make life easier for the pilot. Always retract the cowl flaps before diving and always push forward into a dive in the P-47D. Never roll inverted for prolonged periods because your engine will cut out. And finally, this is not a demonstration of compressibility, just a demonstration of the feature. One of the major advantages of the P-47D is if you look around and see a group of 190s lining up on your tail for a menage a gang, you can put the thing into a dive and leave those fuckers in the dust. The switch for the underwing dive flaps is located conveniently on the left hand side of the cockpit, so as you're hurtling towards your impending doom, you can just reach over, pull the guard down, flip the switch, and hopefully you'll come out the other side without your testicles taking the top of your head off. You can just see the flaps here poking out under the inside of the wings. One of the primary roles of the P-47 was bomber escort. I have a question: why does every gobshite and his dog think that the place to be when covering bombers is among them, like the emo kid at school trying in vain to forestall another well-deserved jolly good hoofing by hiding among the gots? The place to be, like me when I visit Reddit, is well above the rabble, and in the P-47 you should be several thousand shoes above the bombers. That way you can take advantage of the P-47's legendary dive, and if Stevie Wonder and Ray Charles happen to turn up on the German side, you may even get the element of surprise. In this example, I spot Stevie and Ray heading straight for our bombers and a couple of D9s. The last thing I want to do is dive straight at them from here and fight them on a level playing field. I want to preserve my advantage, which means in this aircraft preserving my altitude. I want to wait until the time is right, then dive in and mount one of them from behind. The key here is more prison snuggle and less even struggle. I finally see my opportunity when they separate and one of them chases off after a bomber. He's mine. This is where the P-47D really excels. At high altitude, it picks up speed in a dive like nobody's business. In doing so, it covers a surprising amount of ground, or sky to be more correct. It's already inevitable within a few seconds I'm going to be right up this guy's arse, so I'm already spitting on my hand. Of course, as usual, there is a problem with my cunning little plan. In my rush to unburden myself and this fellow's behind, I may not have thoroughly thought through the consequences. I need to find an angle where I can fire without hitting the bomber. The bomber, on the other hand, couldn't give a monkey's fuck about my health. All it cares about is the big angry German up its arse. In desperation, I try the old machine gun rudder combination, score a couple of hits, and in the process get my K-14 targeting sight knocked out by fire from the bomber. This rather neatly allows me to segue into the damage model. The damage model is not yet complete on this aircraft, and we are in the middle of the transition between the old and the new World War II damage models. In this pre-release version, the engine seems pretty much impervious to damage. However, the visual and some of the electrical and structural damage models are present, as you will see. There I was, happily rolling in trying to get to grips with bombing, and this happened. The initial vibration made me sorry I hadn't brought one of these along. Then I had this strange inkling to look behind. Wait, where's my fucking horizontal stabilizer? I nursed that plane all the way back to Manston. It was a struggle, but an enjoyable one. On another flight, while performing an emergency landing, pre-planned of course, I managed to circumcise my left wing. And don't give me that any landing you walk away from as a good one bollocks. The next time you're driving off your tits on Sinaloa smelling salts, try telling the cop who stops you that any pile-up you can crawl out of is A-OK. Let me know how it goes. Bombing in the P-47 is a fun and educational experience. The two switches on the left are your wing stores and the one on the right is your belly stores. The P-47 was of course one of the premier ground attack aircraft of World War II. I see quite a few gobshites on World War II servers dropping bombs from so close they could see what the fucking target had for breakfast. In most cases they began the dive at a high altitude and released at a relatively high altitude. There's two major reasons for this. First of all, they had rosy-cheeked, fat, hairy, buck-toothed farming women they wanted to get back home to fuck. Yes, your grandmothers. Of equal importance is the fact that getting caught by your own bomb was like breaking your neck while masturbating because you fell out of the tree next to your sister's bedroom window. Hello, Kentucky. There's just no plausible explanation that anyone with an IQ greater than a house brick is going to believe. In the case of fighter bombers like the P-47, bombing was more of an art than a science. Tactics were learned and disseminated through experience, often bitter and costly experience. You're never going to get the accuracy of a JDAM, but if you practice using consistent altitudes and reference points, you can get pretty close. Strafing, on the other hand, was a maniac's game. It was done up close and personal and generally against lightly armoured and lightly defended targets such as troops, trucks, transports, trains and airfields. It must have taken balls of steel to hurtle towards the ground, guns blazing, knowing that one lucky shot could bring about your demise. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I know the elephant in the room here is the channel map. I will be covering that in the next few videos. Before I come in for my first landing, I would like to extend my sincere thank you to Matt, Nick and the team at Eagle Dynamics for allowing me the opportunity to play with the preview version of this module. And before I sum up my final thoughts on the module, just let me beat the comments section by explaining everything that's wrong with the upcoming landing. Hopefully you'll be able to learn by it. First of all, at this point I banked just a tad too much and a little too early, reducing the radius of my turn. I was also probably a little low at this point. At this point I should have been taking corrective measures, but I was blissfully ignorant. One of the issues with being an optimist is you often think you're the shit, when in fact you're just shit. During this part of the turn you'll see I allowed my airspeed to drop below 150 miles per hour. You should really keep it at or around 150 during the approach. The last error was turning too early on final. I'll blame this on it being Sunday morning before my requisite 3 cups of espresso. So what should I have done? I should have been higher and faster. I should have stayed around 150. I should have approached final faster, higher and straight on, not off at an angle like some cross-eyed fucking baboon was flying the plane. On final you want to be going in at 150, be relatively high above the runway, then cut the throttle, glide straight in and flare at the very end into a nice gentle 3-point, touching down between 190 depending on weight and fuel. Because let's face it ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing more embarrassing when attempting to land than having to call the fire brigade to pull you out of a fucking tree like some old lady's cat. The only consolation I can take away from this landing is I didn't bounce, and any landing where you don't break something, cartwheel, bounce or catch fire is a good landing. To sum up, the P-47 is very good at some things, but also surprisingly okay at other things. It's kind of a jack of all trades. Previously, when beginners asked me which World War II module they should try first, I always recommended the P-51. But now I'd have to recommend the P-47. It's a great fighter at high altitude, it's a good ground attack aircraft, and it's surprisingly good in other areas where you expect it not to be so good. It's also tougher than the fat angry chav girl covered in tattoos. Think of this fact, all of the top 10 World War II P-47 aces survived the war. As far as I'm aware, it's the only World War II fighter that can make such a claim. I would like to continue the tradition of summing up with a quick captioned soundbite that no one can publish. So my initial reaction to the P-47 is, the P-47 is just a joy, like a long vigorous wank on a sunny summer afternoon.